Folks, we have a weekend series on tap here at Locked On Pirates and Locked On Cubs. My name is Ethan Smith. You can follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates. And I am joined, of course, by the host of Locked On Cubs, the enemy of the weekend, as we like to say at Locked On Pirates. And I'm sure he's saying the same thing about me over at Locked On Cubs. That's Sam Olbur. Sam, how are you doing today, sir?
I am doing all right. It's a rainy Thursday in Chicago. Cubs bats are cold, and we're going up against a couple of star arms this weekend, so I'm not sure we're going to be getting right quickly.
Yeah, and a lot of the issues that I think both of these teams have going into this series are pretty similar, actually, Sam. As you look at right now, the Pirates' offense has been letting them down over the last couple of weeks, which has been a big reason why they've had the stretch they've had. Then you look at the Cubs, same kind of thing going on, really all over the NL Central. It almost feels like the same kind of deal is going on across the entire NL Central. But this series, to me, already had magnitude. And now we enter Paul David Skenes into the fold, where Paul Skenes, of course, will be debuting on Saturday, meaning that the Pittsburgh Pirates are likely throwing Jared Jones, Paul Skenes, and Mitch Keller all in one weekend, which is just, wow. That is something I don't think I would have told everybody 3 years ago. And adding him to this series already adds to what I would consider a series that's very important for both of these teams, especially considering that our frenemies over there in Milwaukee and St. Louis are also playing each other this weekend. And that NL Central, a lot of people see the Brewers and the Cubs up there right now and say, okay, those might be the two teams that really end up fighting for this thing at the end again. But even with the struggles that the Pirates have had, they're still only 5 games out of first place. And the Cardinals are only 6.5 or 6 out of first place, excuse me. So this is a division now where you're inserting Paul Skenes to the fold. How do you think, from the Cubs' perspective, that can change things as we move forward in the NL Central in 2024?
Yeah, well, when we did the NL Central preview, I like this Pirates team. They were one of my bigger bets to begin the season. I had their over. I can't remember what it was. You might remember.
It was like very low,
72.5, something like that, 73, which I still feel good about. I like their team. I think, you said it really well. The Cubs and Pirates have had a lot of similar issues. Cubs offense here in the last 2-3 weeks really struggling. They're not healthy. The only offense I think that's been worse over like the last couple of weeks has been Pittsburgh. Both teams have had, I think, some success starting pitching wise. Jared Jones is basically just reincarnated as Spencer Strider or vice versa. Mitch Keller, we're going to see him Sunday. He's a wild card. His last start throws a complete game. Sometimes he walks the stadium. But, I like the Pirates team. They're young. They're upcoming. They're going to have to find a way to get some offense. But I think entering Skenes, it makes things really interesting because, I think it's still a little too early for me to be, right in there in the standings. I think, you guys are within 4.5, 5 games of us. So you take care of business. We play 7 games in the next 10 against each other. And 4 of those 7 games are going to feature Jared Jones and Paul Skenes. If you win 5 out of 7, well, there goes the deficit right there. So I think it's really important. I think for the Cubs, from the Cubs perspective, the Cubs are just happy to be getting healthy. They should be getting Seiya Suzuki back on Friday. Cody Bellinger came back on Tuesday. So not having those guys in the lineup in combination with Dansby Swanson and Ian Happ really scuffling, it's not a mystery to figure out why the Cubs haven't really scored many runs. Their pitching staff has bailed them out. You'll see Jameson Taillon, Assad, and Steele, I believe, this weekend. Those guys, obviously Steele's been hurt, but the first 2 have been magnificent and kind of unexpectedly magnificent, which has really kind of kept the Cubs afloat. But I think it's 2 similar teams. I agree. I think it's going to be a really fun series. I think it's going to be a great atmosphere at one of my favorite ballparks, PNC. And, I think the Pirates are going to be ready to go.
Yeah, and it's an interesting dynamic, too, with adding a guy like Skenes. And I've kind of trying to get the perspective from the opposite side, because obviously here in Pittsburgh, this is a big deal. I mean, we've had people in Pittsburgh already saying that this is the most highly touted prospect debut in history. That's including guys like Garrett Cole, who's a 1-1. You look at Andrew McCutchen, you look at some of the other Pirates greats that have debuted over the years. Yeah. And Skenes is going to be the fastest number 1 pick to debut in almost 35 years. And that was the expectation that Pirates fans had from the get-go, is that he was going to be up here very quickly. It seems that they had the plan set out where he was going to throw a little bit in the minors first to get himself under his feet wet, get his feet under him, figure it out before he comes up here. It is interesting, too, that albeit this Cubs offense is not exactly playing at its top performance right now, but it is still an offense that is going to possess a challenge, I think, for a guy like Paul Skenes. I mean, you look at the names that you mentioned. Seiya Suzuki coming back healthy. He's a firecracker. He can get hot very quickly in games. Ian Happ, of course. I have a soft spot for Ian Happ because he's from Pittsburgh. Got to have a soft spot for that guy, even if he plays for the Chicago Cubs. You bring back Cody Bellinger in the offseason, which was the big marquee move for the Cubs outside of Shoto Imanaga, who's been an absolute demon on the mound lately, and really the only reason I think that Jared Jones isn't the front runner for NL Rookie of the Year. Yeah. So this is a very interesting test for Paul Skenes right away, because not only are you going up against an offense that does have the potential to put up runs, but you're doing it against a division rival in front of what is likely going to be a sellout crowd with your expectations already heightened because of what Jared Jones has done already.
Yeah. I love it. I think, from a non-Pirate perspective, I think it's great for the game. I wish it wasn't happening against the Cubs so I could just enjoy the start. But, I think it's great for the game, and I love it from the Pirates, right? The Cubs are going to be one of the teams. I think if you're going to do something really good this year, you're going to be chasing the Cubs. You got to go through the Cubs. And so why not bring him up on a Saturday and then maybe the following Friday have his first 2 starts come against a team he's probably going to face as much as anybody in his career? Mm-hmm. I think, with everything that's been going on with pitchers lately, all I hope for Skenes is just health. I think if he stays healthy and his arm's in good shape, I think he's going to dominate at this level. I don't expect him, I did a little bit of research just because we have to face him. I don't expect him to throw more than 5 innings on Saturday, no. anything crazy like that. So he's probably going to be max effort. If Pirates fans are watching and saying, okay, well, what do the Cubs do? Well, the Cubs, when they're going right, which they haven't been offensively in quite a while, they do take a lot of pitches and they will draw their walks, the Mike Talkmans, the Ian Happs of the world. So, Skenes, I would assume the game plan for the Cubs is going to be to make him work, but it always goes twofold, right? Because if you take 2 pitches and you go 0-2, he's going to wipe you out. So I think it's be fun. If I had to guess, if I had to predict what I'm expecting Saturday, probably something along the lines of maybe 5 innings, one or 2 runs, and a whole bunch of Ks would be the safe bet.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because we mentioned the pitching matchups in the series, which I think we'll get a little bit into more in the second segment. Yeah. It is interesting that I mentioned about the expectations being heightened for a guy like Skenes because of Jared Jones.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to exactly help if Jared Jones goes out there tomorrow, which I hope he does go out there tomorrow and do what he's done throughout the entire season. But then for Paul Skenes to have to go out there and immediately follow him after that, that's a tough task to do right now with a guy that's been breaking rookie records left and right in terms of innings pitched and strikeout numbers and everything that he's been doing. And I just like that it's happening in a divisional game because it has felt for quite a while now that the Pittsburgh Pirates in particular have kind of been out of the NL Central divisional kind of battles that we've seen in the past. And obviously the Pirates had the big battles with the Reds from Amir Garrett and Yasiel Puig and all that other stuff. But it hasn't really felt like they've had a rivalry with teams like the Cubs, like the Cardinals, like the Milwaukee Brewers, or even the Reds for that matter, for quite a while now. But now that you're starting to insert some of these young guys that you mentioned that we hope will find a way to take the next step and put them into that contention window, these kind of games feel like they have heightened importance, which I've talked about on my show all week. In this division that you agree and we all agreed in the NL Central preview is a very winnable division that theoretically any of these 5 teams can win. These are the kind of games that you got to go out there and win. And I think the decision for them to bring up Skenes is just perfect timing. I mean, I don't see any other timing that you see because there's no other stretch in the season for the Pirates in specific where they're going to play 10 straight division games.
Who do you guys have between us?
Milwaukee.
Who
we've already played this year.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. So that's cool. Good. That's awesome. That's gonna be a fun stretch for you guys. For the Cubs, going into this weekend, obviously, I think the easy thing to say would be, hey, this is a more important weekend for the Pirates than it is the Cubs. You got your number one prospect, the number one pitching prospect in baseball coming up. Crowd's going to be wild, like you said. For the Cubs, they go to Atlanta after this, which, isn't usually a pleasant experience for anybody, but especially the Cubs. That's where the Cubs season basically ended last year. So the Cubs are going to have to find a way to, at minimum beat Mitch Keller. But, you'd like to see them, win this series. And then we get you guys coming in for 4 next weekend. I don't think a ton of people realize that, which basically means I think I think Jones most likely would wrap the Brewers series. So we wouldn't see him, but we'll see Skenes again. We'll see Keller again. So, we're going to get pretty familiar here over these next 7 games. And my guess is, just usually how it works is it's probably going to be someone's going to win 4, somebody's going to win 3. That's just usually how those things go when it's a tight matchup. But, the Cubs, if the Cubs do go in this weekend and lose 2 out of 3, coming off losing 2 out of 3 to San Diego at home, then going to Atlanta, they could be in, you could see a path for their first little funk of the season. So it'd be really nice if the Cubs could find a way to beat one of these 2 guys, but we'll have to see. I'm looking forward to it. I really am. Typically Cubs Pirates series over the last, 3, 4, 5 years weren't ones that no, and obviously not being disrespectful, but they weren't ones that you circle on the calendar or go, okay, like, Cubs Cardinals, Cubs Brewers, right? Those check those. But this is one of those weekends. It's going to be a buzz. And, I haven't seen PNC for the last time I can remember Cubs Pirates at PNC crazy was probably 2015 wild card game. So it's going to be fun. I'm excited. I'm excited for you guys. I always like the Pirates. They're probably the team in the division I have the least, hate for lack of a better word. So, it's a great baseball town, Pittsburgh. And I'm excited to see how they turn out, especially for Saturday, but I bet Friday too.
Yeah, and I'll be at both games on Friday and Saturday. Let's just hope the pesky Mother Nature does not ruin any of this, because that would be very annoying if that happens. But we're going to talk a little bit more about this series, preview this series a little bit more in depth outside of Paul Skenes, because yes, he's only pitching one day. He's not going to be pitching all 8 or 27 innings of this series, of course, unless we go to extra innings, which of course it's a Pirates Cubs series. It probably will happen in one of these games. But before we do that, folks, let's hear from a new sponsor of Locked On, Stitch Fix. Folks, here at Locked On, style's so good you could feel it. You got style. You have to have style. Sam has style. I have style. And we're going to bring Sam back in here for a minute because you could see our differing styles, of course. You have the black and yellow here and the red and blue there. But at Stitch Fix, that instant confidence boost you get from an outfit that makes you look really good. Well, that's what I get with Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style, your size, and your budget, and they do all the shopping for you. And it's the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. Stitch Fix makes it all so easy that I don't like to shop, and they save me that time and effort. Plus, I get outfits that make me look and feel really good with the summer coming right around the corner. And if you don't love something, it's super simple. Just send it back, just like the Pirates' 9-game losing streak in 2023 to the Cubs and the Brewers. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free. Style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/MLB and get $20 off your first fix. That's stitchfix.com/MLB for $20 off, and you must redeem within 7 days of signing up. And thank you to Stitch Fix, of course, for sponsoring today's episode of Locked On Pirates and Locked On Cubs. It is a Locked On crossover. Say that 10 times fast. Locked On Pirates, Locked On Cubs, Locked On crossover. Probably can't do it. Again, you mentioned going into the series and previewing the series. Both of these teams coming into this series off of a series loss at home. Very interesting in the same exact manner, 2 out of 3. Pirates probably a lot more sour tasting, I think, because the Padres obviously a dead 500 team right at 20-20. The Los Angeles Angels, of course, without Mike Trout, that's really a team for the Pirates, especially at home, that you want to go out and beat. They did beat them in the first game, but then, of course, the following 2, not so much, and things didn't look all that great. So from the Cubs standpoint, What are the keys to victory, do you think, in this series for them, especially on the offensive side, which is what I think will eventually make things happen?
Yeah, so the Cubs are in this stretch. So they swept Houston a couple of weeks ago. And then since then, they lost 2 out of 3 in Boston. They split in New York against the Mets. And then they won a really tight series at home against Milwaukee, lost 2 out of 3 against San Diego. So they've been kind of in this 500-ish realm here for a while. I think the key is just finding ways to get back to doing what they do offensively. There just hasn't been a whole lot of traffic on the base paths. On Wednesday afternoon, they lost 2 out of 3 to the Padres. They had 1 hit against Dylan Cease, and it should not have been a hit. It was a routine comebacker to the mound that he deflected. I think the guys I have to circle, would be Pittsburgh native Ian Happ. I mean, he has been it's been a real struggle for him. I think he's slugging like 309, something like that. It's just really, it's been really rough for him. And then, of course, like I said, Seiya Suzuki coming back, they're going to need him. And then Dansby Swanson, it'll be interesting to see if he's in the lineup on Friday. He's been battling a little bit of a knee thing. So we'll see what happens with him. But similar to the Pirates, it's the same thing. Offense, and then the other similarity we have as teams is that David Bednar has been a real struggle to begin the year. And for the Cubs, Adbert Alzolay already has lost his closer role. And now if you see Adbert Alzolay this weekend, it would probably be good news for you, because that means the Cubs are losing, because that's really the only time he's pitching is if the Cubs are up a lot or they're losing, because he's blown, I believe, 5 saves this year, 6 games overall. And if he was pitching at the level he was last year, the Cubs would probably be 3, 4, 5 games ahead of Milwaukee at this point. So I think if the Cubs get a lead, hold it, and then just finding ways to create traffic, because going up against Jones and Skenes, even though Skenes is obviously young, this isn't a guy you're just going to, hit a ton of home runs off of. The way to get these guys is going to be by drawing out at bats, trying to get them out of the game early, getting to that middle relief, and going from there. So my key would just be making the aces work, making the high stuff guys work, and creating traffic on the base paths. That would be my key.
Yeah, and it's almost like you were echoing pretty much the same points we've been talking about in Pittsburgh at this point, is their offensive philosophy has pretty much been get the starter out of the game and get to the bullpen. They kind of achieved that goal on Wednesday against Jose Soriano and the Angels. And the Angels, of course, having one of the worst bullpens in baseball, you expect, okay, the Pirates are winning this game 4-2. And then that middle relief kind of gave it up in Luis Ortiz, where we end up losing 5-4. So I think a lot of the keys in this series to victory are pretty similar for both teams. For the Pirates, that counteract what you were saying, you're obviously hoping that Jones, Skenes, and Keller can go deep into these games, and that you don't really have to run into that middle relief where you have a Luis Ortiz or a Josh Fleming or even like whoever that you have go out there. You want it to be that trio that you were talking about all offseason, that's Colin Holderman, Aroldis Chapman, and David Bednar, because yes, despite his struggles, David Bednar has picked it up as of late. And one thing a lot of people don't really remember is he was hurt for a large portion of spring training. So he was practically having his spring training in training almost in April. And it was very interesting to see that, because you've seen the ERA drop. And obviously even at this point in the year, seeing a reliever's ERA is never really anything to really look at, because they're just so big numbers. Offense is where it's at for me again. We've seen O'Neal Cruz pick it up as of late, thank God, because he was looking very, very bad for quite a while. And obviously up there in strikeouts. And I think everybody in baseball likes to see when O'Neal Cruz is playing well, but he slowly and surely started to pick it up. And the Pirates broadcast shared something I found very interesting, is that when he's batting third or fourth, that's where his best splits in terms of average, OPS, everything is best when he's in those spots. So for Derek Shelton, I think it really kind of all leads to a domino effect, where you probably are going to have Kutch lead off or Connor Joe lead off. And then you're going to hand it off to Brian Reynolds, Connor Joe, some of the other guys have been getting it done. Really, where I think the biggest issue the Pirates are having right now is that bottom of the lineup is practically giving you absolutely nothing. And you cannot have your 5 through 9 hitters giving you nothing, because that's pretty much giving away an inning and almost an inning and a half of just absolutely no production. And when you're facing guys like Justin Steele and Jamison Tyone, and I believe you said it was going to be Javier Assad that was going to pitch on one of these days as well, you let those guys get into a groove and you're screwed, especially Justin Steele. And I think that the Cubs are probably thinking the same way. Both of these teams are going to try to get the opposing starter out of their groove. I think that's the biggest thing that's going to make the difference in this series.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Friday will be interesting because Tyone has gotten off to a great start. You guys are familiar, obviously, with Tyone. And he's gotten off to a great start this year. But last year, what gave him problems was lefty slug. Mm-hmm. So, the O'Neill Cruzes of the world, the Sawinskis of the world, the Reynolds of the world, it'll be interesting to see if he can continue to neutralize that. Assad is a guy, I watch him pitch every game. I still can't figure it out, but he somehow has success almost every time out. Mm-hmm. A lot of traffic on the bases, but he always weasels his way out of it. So hopefully he can continue that this weekend. And then Steele, Steele's probably the guy the Cubs feel the best. That matchup, I think Steele should be Sunday. That Steele-Keller matchup is probably the matchup we feel the best about. Because Keller, I was thrilled to see. I actually have Keller on my fantasy team, and the guy, I mean, sometimes he looks like Nolan Ryan. Sometimes he looks like, he might not ever pitch again. And so seeing him throw a complete game against the Angels means maybe he's due, hopefully, for one of his mediocre starts. But yeah, Steele, really could neutralize those guys that I mentioned. And, I feel good about that. So hopefully if the Cubs could just, find a way to do something on offense against Jones or Skenes, it'll line up Sunday for a possible series win. But, we'll see. I think it's the same keys. I think it's the same thing. How have you guys been? One of our issues has been we're going into the year. We were such banner. This middle infield defense, this is going to be one of the best defenses in the league. It's been one of the worst so far this year. A lot of errors. Dansby Swanson hasn't been good on either side of the ball. Nico Horner, I believe, leads the team in errors. It's been a struggle defensively, too. It's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and one of the big issues that we've had defensively, just to end it on this point before we get to, of course, kind of visiting history between the Pirates and the Cubs, is the outfield defense. Michael A. Taylor was brought in to kind of make the outfield defense overall just very much better than it is. Meanwhile, you're just not really seeing it. There's a lot of miscommunication issues. Connor Joe, Jack Sawinski, and Brian Reynolds are just not plus defenders. Edward Oliveira is obviously an outfielder they got from the Kansas City Royals in the offseason, also not a plus defender. So if you have those balls that are kind of in no man's land for the Cubs, you're mentioning getting on base and clogging the base pass. Right. Maybe a blooper or two does that for you. And that's been an issue for the Pirates where you just kind of have those communication issues. And not only in the outfield, but sometimes even with the infielders, when you get those balls that are kind of in that middle ground where you're hoping that one of them just calls the other off, you don't really see it. And it's very interesting that is even a component to why the Pirates have lost some games as well. And we're going to talk about history a little bit, Sam, when we come back for the final segment, because, of course, these two teams played each other in the postseason in 2015. It seems like the Pirates are kind of getting back to being a competitive baseball team. Meanwhile, the Cubs fully ingrained in the NL Central race. We'll see how the rest of the season goes. We'll talk a little bit of history and what we think these teams will look like as the season progresses. But before we do, folks, we're going to hear from Policygenius and DoorDash. Policygenius is here to check life insurance off your to-do list in absolutely no time, because Policygenius helps you compare your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts is always on hand to help you talk through it. You can talk to a team of award-winning agents who will walk you through the process step by step and easily compare quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. Your work-life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for the needs that your family needs. And even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. Policygenius will always give you unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team, and you can check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnMLB or click the link in the description of both of our shows to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnMLB. And Sam, I'm pretty sure you know, and I'm pretty sure you already got the gift that she needs, but it's Mother's Day this Sunday. For all the moms out there, happy Mother's Day. And if you need to get something for mom very special, of course. You know, maybe she needs a new iPhone, or maybe she just wants flowers, or maybe she really, really likes chocolate. Well, you can order on DoorDash today using code LOCKEDONMLB because she has a sweet tooth. They got you covered. Is she a tech enthusiast? DoorDash has you covered. Pair her flowers with a gift card so she can celebrate any way she wants, because you can get thoughtful gifts she deserves with the convenience you need by choosing same-day delivery or scheduling your DoorDash delivery a week ahead for when flowers and gifts should arrive to her door with DoorDash. And with a Dash Pass membership, you'll save with a $0 delivery fee and reduce service fees on eligible orders from Dash Pass merchants that meet the minimum subtotal. Other fees apply. So get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off your next order up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with Locked On MLB. That's code Locked On MLB when ordering with DoorDash today. And folks, thank you again for tuning into the Locked On Pirates and Locked On Cubs podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. And we're talking a little bit about history here. Ethan Smith, Sam Olbur, talking a little bit about the history between these two teams. And we mentioned a little bit earlier that since 2015, this rivalry has not really felt like one. And I don't even really know if we're considering it a rivalry all that much. I think if the Pirates fans had to pick a bona fide rival in the division, it would probably be Cincinnati, just by geographical standards, because the Pirates are the most East team in the Central, while all the Central teams are actually in the Central. So as far as history is concerned, from what we've seen from 2015 to 2024, are you sensing a little bit of a feeling that even going into this weekend, that these games are just heightening in importance again?
Yeah, and first of all, I did get my mom a Mother's Day gift, and it is Cubs Pirates May 19th at Wrigley Field.
Well, there you go.
So that'll be something. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the Pirates calculated this Skenes thing. I don't think it's a coincidence that they brought him up where they're going to get Jared Jones against the Cubs and Brewers, and they're going to get Paul Skenes against the Cubs and Cubs. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think, rivalries typically, are based on, outside of, I think the only rivalry in the division that doesn't really matter what the records are Cubs Cardinals,
Agreed.
Outside of that, it's just about who's good at the time. Like Milwaukee, I wouldn't look at Milwaukee as a rival if they were winning 65 games every year, but they're annoying. They bother me. So, that's been what it is. So I think so. Yeah, I think that these games will feel heightened. I think, the Central is in such a unique place because the Cubs have some talent, have some legit talent right now, but they also feel very good about their farm system. Pittsburgh feels tremendous about their farm system. Cincinnati, I think, feels really good about their farm system. Milwaukee, I think so. I mean, the Brewers are so hard to figure out. And ironically, I think the Cardinals right now, if we were drafting, hey, your first overall draft pick and your second of teams in the Central for the next 10 years, I think the Cardinals might be the last pick. I know that sounds crazy, but so it does feel a little bit heightened because I think the sharp Cub fans know the Pirates are coming and they're going to have to be dealt with. And this weekend's probably the first real taste of that.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, that you consider it even, I'd use a great example of what's been happening in this division with another division. We've seen now the Baltimore Orioles, who were absolutely horrible for the better part of a half decade. And then you saw them every year get into the top of the draft, get Jackson Holiday, Heston Kjerstad, Adley Rutschman. All of those guys have now convened on Camden Yards. And Orioles fans know that they have a good team, but the rest of the division has also kind of said, well, now we hate the Orioles because they're good. Right. And I feel like that's kind of the sentiment that we share here in Pittsburgh. Is Cincinnati. It's like, yeah, we're rivals with Cincinnati, but it was much more of a rivalry in 2013 when they were both fighting each other in a wild card game for the first time for both teams in quite a while. And then you obviously play the Cubs in 2015. The rivalry was very heightened there with Jake Arrieta just shutting down everything in PNC Park. But as this team slowly starts to come back up, I do think that you're going to start seeing animosity from the other fan bases again. St. Louis fans right now are kind of in a weird place because the Cardinals are just not a good baseball team in my eyes whatsoever. Sorry, JD Hafron. I just don't see it going anywhere if Ollie Marmol is your manager. They make a managerial change, which I hope they don't. Then I get a little bit more scared because I'm always scared of the red and white down there in St. Louis. Milwaukee's a very interesting team too, because I remember talking about it on the NL Central preview that they were one of those teams where they could easily do what they're doing now and win and be in contention in this division, or they could completely blow it up at the deadline. And we still don't know what they're going to do because it's still so early and so soon. But I really do think that every team in this division has a real shot to win. So I don't even say really that just Pirates Cubs is heightened now. I think every time that you see an NL Central matchup on your schedule, be it Pirates, Cubs, Reds, Brewers, or Cardinals, those games have magnitude, especially with the way the schedule has changed and playing less division games than we've seen in the past.
I fully agree. Who before we get off, who is who's on the top of your Cubs? Played for the Cubs and Pirates list? I mean, ours is an easy one, but whose is yours? Who are
that
yours?
Played for both teams?
Yeah.
Like one player that played for both teams?
Yeah. Like a former Cub, former Pirate.
Oh Lord.
I'll go first because I put you on the spot, because for us it's an easy decision. Obviously it's Aramis. The Aramis trade in 2003. I think we picked up Randall Simon in that deal too. But Aramis, everybody, I don't want to talk too much about 2003. I've had a rough enough day. But, Aramis, when you're talking about the greatest third baseman in Cubs history, obviously, there's Sano and there's Chris Bryant, but Aramis stacks up right there with those guys. So he's up there. Jason Kendall's one that comes to mind. Tyone's one on Friday. He's throwing. There's so many. I think Jose Quintana pitched for you guys for a minute, right?
Yes, he did. He pitched for us last year. We traded him to St. Louis, or was it? No, 2022 is when we traded Jose Quintana, I believe. It was either last year or the year before, but he did pitch for us for like half a season. I love that you mentioned Jason Kendall. One that I'll actually throw at you that I think is very interesting, and he was a little bit before my time, but still not crazy before my time. I was born in 98, but he played in 91 and 94 for the Pirates, is Gary Varsho. Felt like that was a very interesting one that played for both the Cubs and the Pirates. And there's plenty of players that have played for the Cubs and the Pirates, but I would have to say probably Ian Happ is probably one of my favorite Cubs just by proxy of him being from Pittsburgh. He's a guy that usually kills the Pirates. So we'll see how things turn out this weekend between the Pittsburgh Pirates and, of course, the Chicago Cubs. I will be there in attendance Friday and Saturday. Sam, of course, will be watching at home, hoping that Jared Jones and Paul Skenes don't absolutely shut everything down. But Sam, tell everybody where they can find all of your work over at Locked On Cubs.
Yeah, Locked On Cubs. Come find us on YouTube. Just search Locked On Cubs, and then if you anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, whatever else there is, just like yourself. We like to talk about the Cubs, and sometimes we pop in. We talk a little Pirates. We talk other teams as well. So.
And of course, by the way, you can find Locked On Pirates in all those places that you can find Locked On Cubs at YouTube. Hit the subscribe and like button on both shows and get the notification bell on so you know when the new episodes are dropping. You can also find this podcast on all of your audio platforms and Locked On Cubs, because both are free and available to you every Monday through Friday here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates and your Chicago Cubs every day. Folks, enjoy the rest of your Friday. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the games this weekend, and we'll see what happens. But until then, we'll see you on the flip side.